Good evening, everyone. My name is Hayden. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the co-founder and CTO of Perla, and tonight we're going to be doing a very brief onboarding webinar and answer some questions that you might have about setting up an account on Perla, and also just some general questions about Perla. But before we get into that, um, I am joined here by Tash tonight from Tash Invests. Hi, Tash.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It's no problem. Tash is going to be joining us, asking some questions from her followers. Tash has sent a few of you our way, and hopefully we can be helpful tonight. Is there anything you want to say, Tash, before we get underway?
Yeah, I've got a few questions from my stories, so let me know if you've got any more. Just comment them so I can ask them to Hayden afterwards. But all good otherwise.
Excellent. Yes. For those of you who are coming here through Pearl and not Tash, feel free to just post in the YouTube chat as well. We're kind of monitoring everything, so it should be pretty fine. But otherwise, we will just get into it. So, what we're going to do is a quick 5 minute basic kind of run through of setting up an account on Perla. And I think I'll preface this with saying that internally at Perla, we have a bunch of projects that we look after at any given time. And right now, one of the two most important things we're looking at is our entire onboarding flow. So to anyone here who has had trouble signing up to Perla, getting an account set up, I guess I just want you to understand that it's quite high on the list. It's this project we have called um, full onboarding, where essentially from the moment someone registers, we want to take them through the entire journey, handhold them, and help them as much as we can. So the webinar we're covering tonight is basically a legacy system, which you can all see today. It's something that we've had going for a couple of years, and it'll still be there for probably another month or two. But because it's there for another month or two, we do need to help you out with it. So firstly, this is an account that I've kind of set up like a test account. I have done nothing on this account, haven't put any money in or anything like that. And whether you have a current Perla account or you've just signed up, the one universal way that you can always kind of open an account or finish setting up your account to make investments is if you come up to the top on the little profile icon, you can click on switch/add investment accounts, and you can go and create a new investment account. Now, if it's your first time signing up, we will generally prompt you to do this on the dashboard, but I like to show this because you can do this anytime, anywhere, no matter what. So, no ambiguity there. Now, if you click on add new investment account, you get brought to this fairly, I guess, scary screen, as far as I'm concerned, which asks some questions and asks you basically answer something that might seem like you kind of have how many, five, six relatively similar options. But what's really important to highlight about this screen is that the vast majority of our customers choose the top option. These options are choosing your account type. The account type is, when it comes to investing, who kind of has the legal ownership of the shares or micro, whatever product you're using. And the legal ownership mostly matters in terms of, I guess, tax time, as well as things like, maybe, estate settlements, divorces, something like that. What happens if someone who owns the shares might pass away, a whole bunch of things like that. It's all just like legal ownership and tax. Now, again, most customers are investing on Perla as themselves. Just like you would go and buy a car, you buy a car, whether you have kids or you're in a relationship or whatever, you buy a car, it's in your name. It's that simple. Then we have joint accounts, which is when you and a partner legally own things 50-50. And that probably attributes about 5 to 8% of our accounts. And then we start to get into kind of the far less common ones. Investment company is extremely rare. I'm not even going to talk about it. If you're not abundantly clear that you need to invest as an investment company, it doesn't really apply to you. So don't worry about it. Trust in SMSF, this is for people with family trusts or self-managed super funds. Again, it's one of those things where if you don't know what a family trust is, it's not for you. If you don't know what a self-managed super fund is, it's not for you. If you have one of those two things set up, which you can mostly just talk to your accountant to figure out, then that might be for you. That's also a really small number of people, probably less than 1%. And then we have investing for kids here, which is when you as a parent are able to invest on behalf of your children. So basically open an account where they legally own the money, but you kind of oversee it. For those of us that kind of grow up watching TV and things, you'll hear about, like trust funds and things like that, where like the parents aren't allowed to touch it. I'm not saying it's that verbatim, but it's spiritually along the same lines. It's a way of trying to put your money to your kids in a way that isn't strictly under your control. Because obviously, if you have a child, you could invest in an account under your name and then just give them the money later. And frankly, the difference between choosing those two options mostly comes down to tax implications. In which case, if you're not too sure which one of those two works, if you are investing for a child, it's probably best to talk to an accountant because they're going to be most familiar with your personal circumstances and can guide you, because that's not something that we're equipped to do. Now, you'll notice that on some of these, you'll see this little shares and micro tick, like individual and minor. Sorry about the cough, I'm kind of shaking it off at the moment. Whereas the rest of them just say shares. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on individual and we're going to talk about that distinction, because when you come to this next page here, you get the shares and micro toss up. So if you choose a joint account or a trust account or an investing company account, etc., you won't be able to choose between these two. You'll have to go down the shares route. And that is simply a restriction of the technology providers that we use underneath the hood. Because at the end of the day, Pearl is a service that uses other services, and those services use other services, right? The big web of technology services. And they simply say we can't do it. So, for instance, we would love to be able to open up a micro account for people in a relationship, how they can invest in micro 50-50. However, when we ask the people that provide the services to us, can you do it? Their answer right now is some combination of no, or hopefully in the future, hopefully soon, but not right now. If at any point we can do that, it's something that we'll absolutely expose to our customers, but it's not really necessarily by our choice. Obviously, we'd prefer the most choice for all of our customers. Now, getting to pretty much the key question here, which is what is the difference between shares and micro? The good thing about these two is they're actually quite different, and that makes the choice between them a little bit easier than some more obscure choices. At the core of it, I like to describe shares as a product where you basically pay per time you invest, and micro is a product where you pay a monthly fee instead. So shares is like you don't really have a monthly fee to keep the account open, but every time you do invest more money or de-invest, take money out, we clip you with a fee. And micro, no clipping on the way in and out, but a monthly fee. Now, structurally, the reason for that is because with shares, the cost to us as a business comes from the actual transaction to you, because we simply allow you to buy and sell shares or ETFs on the stock market, and we facilitate that transaction, and you own those shares directly. Whereas with micro, what happens is that we have a managed fund structure, very much like your super fund is kind of how I like to describe it. It is a bit of a simplification because obviously it's not a super fund, but when you contribute money into super, your super fund doesn't charge you money when you put money in. They just simply charge you like a yearly fee that they accumulate. So they charge you a fee for basically managing it, but you can put as much money as you want in. If you want to go put $1,000 in your super once, or go put $10 in every week or year, both kind of the same. Shares is different though. Now, people might say, okay, that's kind of interesting, Hayden, but what do I do? What I can tell you from experience talking to other customers, the biggest, I guess, factor that plays into it for a lot of people is the minimums. So shares has a minimum purchase size of basically $500 to own just one share. So for instance, or ETF. When I say share, think share or ETF. So if you would like to invest in one Vanguard ETF, such as VAS, you have to go and put $500 minimum on your first purchase. And every purchase after that, whilst you can make smaller amounts, you have to remember, as you can see on the screen here, that it's $6.50 per transaction to buy or sell. And if you just think about it mathematically, what that means is that at investing $650, you are paying a 1% fee to invest. And generally speaking, that would be considered quite high in my opinion. It's not something that we super actively encourage people to invest in super small amounts. What's probably if I was talking to a family or friend about this, I'd probably say, yeah, try and invest every time you get maybe $1,000 or $2,000. Now, there's a lot of nuance there and different things that suit different people. But if you're just focused on trying to balance putting, getting money invested sooner and also not paying too many fees, what you end up with is kind of this thousand-ish order of magnitude amount that needs to go in. Whereas with micro, because there is no minimum and because you're not getting charged per transaction, it essentially means that you can open an account with as little as $5 and you can put in $5 a week or $10 a month. You can put in really small amounts. That's why we call it micro. And on top of that, we don't actually charge you. I don't think it actually says it. Oh, there it is. I just have to scroll down. We don't actually charge you to keep the account open until you get over $100. So even though we do charge $1.70 a month as a base, if you just invest in one thing, which most of our customers do, until you actually have $100 invested, you don't pay any management fee. So that can be really appealing for people starting out because you can go and dump $50 in if you'd like. We don't charge you any money as Perla, and you don't, as you can contribute $5 a week, you don't have to carry that fee. What we do also see is that a lot of people over time may drift from micro towards shares because as you have a bigger and bigger portfolio, we do see a trend. Again, this doesn't mean it might be right for you, but we do see a trend that people drift towards shares as well. So micro is a great getting started mechanism. That's where we see its usage from our customers. So if you're sitting around with $20 to invest and you're feeling a little bit nervous or you're not sure how to start, it's a great place to look. Whereas shares is probably a little bit more for people who have, summed up a bit more money or are feeling a little bit kind of more mature and confident with their investing. I think they're the big bookends. There's a few other kind of nuances I should unpack with that, Tash, but I was curious if you had any questions that you think I should elaborate on the shares versus micro thing to start.
Yeah, I think you nailed that pretty much. That was awesome. No, I think we're all good. But anyone, let me know if you've got any other questions that haven't been answered. But I think those key points definitely are the minimum amounts, how much you want to invest, and what you want to invest in as well. Like micro has 8 ETFs, is that right, Hayden?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you want to invest in something that's not one of those, then micro probably isn't right for you.
Yeah,
But the
definitely.
rest, yeah, it's something good.
I think as well, probably the one other thing to note is that, and we'll kind of unpack this in a sec, because of how the shares accounts work, if you invest in shares on Perla, you can actually easily pick up your shares and go and transfer them to another platform if you open an account in the same name without incurring any kind of weird tax implications or something like that. So one thing I like to remind people is like, while micro has this kind of safety in being low cost for small investments, shares has this safety in like, if you put $1,000 in Perla and frankly, you turn around in a month and you don't like us anymore, you can actually just go and kind of transfer that out. We don't charge you any money for it. So there is some kind of, escape plan if you want with shares. Obviously with micro, you can sell it off, but that will mean that there's just one more thing to do at tax time. Cool. Yeah, I think we can go into some questions now if you want, Tash.
Yeah, definitely. I've got one here from in the chat saying, you might not know the answer to this one, but I'm from the UK and I'll move to Australia soon. I want to move my investments from the UK to Perla. Will that be possible?
It's a good question. So when you ask the question, I want to move my investments from the UK, the most likely answer is no, because what Perla does is we basically have ASX, which are the Australian Stock Exchange, shares and ETFs you can buy, a couple thousand of them. And we also have US, which is the NYSE or NASDAQ exchanges. And if you, for some reason, have in the UK bought ASX or US, NASDAQ, NYSE shares, then yes, you can transfer them to Perla. However, if you're from the UK and you bought them on like the UK stock market or a different stock market that we don't have, or they're in sorry, my bad. Or they're in some kind of managed fund structure, kind of like a micro equivalent for whatever platform you're using, then they're not going to be in a transferable state. And the way to move them is going to be to sell them down off the UK platform, whatever that is, and then buy something else in Perla.
We just got one as well about the auto invest feature, which you definitely didn't touch on, but I think that's a great question. Are you able to walk us through that one and the different options, Hayden?
Yeah, so what I can show you, this should work really quickly. So in at Perla, we do believe pretty strongly in the, providing the ability for our customers to automate quite easily. We're actually expanding the definition of what that means quite dramatically at the moment internally. We've got some cool updates coming in the next couple of months. But what it means right now is that whether you're a shares or a micro customer, you can see here we have shares or micro, you are able to automatically invest in those, typically via one of two methods, which is either one, making a recurring deposit from your bank account. So you can see there that most of our customers actually invest an average of $431 every 2 weeks. That's an average. Obviously, people aren't going and putting $431 in specifically. But what that means is that every 2 weeks, on average, we do a direct debit from someone's Australian bank account, and then we go and invest it in shares or micro. We do that totally end to end without kind of any human intervention. So once it's set up, you don't have to touch it. It just kind of happens. Or if you don't want to do recurring deposits, you can also do a roundup, which is something that a few other platforms support. I believe Spaceship, Voyager, and Raise are two of the big platforms I know that support it. And what that is where we actually can connect to your bank account, and every single time you make a transaction, we round up that transaction and we take that amount rounded up and we invest it. So if on a Monday you go and buy a $3.30 coffee, we round that up to $4. That's 70 cents that we invest. And then on Tuesday, if you go and buy a $10.10 burger, that's 90 cents to round up to $11. So then we go and invest 90 cents for you. So that's a great way, I think, for people who might struggle to actually proactively invest and just kind of need to, have some mechanism that's just picking it up slowly. Uh, Sorry for the coughing again. But yeah, they're kind of the couple main ways to automate. But at Pearl, we're actually expanding that definition at the moment to also allow people to more seamlessly, automatically donate to causes they like alongside investing, as well as automatically choose what to do with your dividends or distributions when you get paid them from the shares or ETFs that you own, whether you want to reinvest them or whether you want to pull them out or some kind of combination of both.
Nicole just followed up with, there's so many great questions coming through. And I love the donating feature as well. But Nicole just followed up with, are we able to customize the frequency of the investing? I.e., if money gets deposited every 2 weeks, but I only like to invest in stocks every month to reduce fees, is this possible?
Yes,
Yes,
yes, yeah,
because I
absolutely.
do that as well. Yeah, I do $200 a week that gets taken out, and then I invest once it reaches 1,000 every 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love to see what Tash is doing because that's pretty much like that's one of the reasons we started the whole recurring deposit thing, because we know that there are people out there, for instance, who might have the I said at the start with shares and micro, they might only be saving $10 or $20 a week, but they do really want to invest directly in shares or ETFs, but they know they got to wait maybe for a $500 or $1,000 minimum. So you can set it up like that, and we just kind of bank it up in the platform, and then once it crosses a line, we just go and invest it and keep going.
Amazing. There's definitely some fun stuff with dividends, but before we get to that, Bonnie asked, this is a good question. When creating my account, I stopped at the part where I had to enter my place of work. Are these details necessary to be able to finish the setup?
That is a great question, Bonnie. I'm just going to see if I can go back to where we were at before, and see how far I can get in the flow. Obviously, I'm not actually opening an account, so I'm just going to try and skip ahead so people can have a visual as to what Bonnie's talking about. So when you get further on to opening your account, we start to ask you questions like this. Now, I know for a lot of people, we start off and it says, okay, title, marital status, gender. There's a few little info pop-ups here that explain things, but then you start to get, oh, there's my old address. That's all right. Privacy. So there we go. Here, there we go. So this is me putting in some test information earlier. Now, what you'll see here is a bunch of questions, particularly like you'll see annual income, employment status, occupation. Now, Bonnie's referring to questions where we ask things like, where do you work and what's your income? Now, for the background here, the where these questions come from is the underlying service providers that we have. So the underlying service providers that we use, and you can go find them on our website, they're just kind of like wholesale tech platforms. They ask for this information to be able to open an account. Most of the time, they'll do that for risk management. Um, so a good example is with annual income is to do with, uh, they've got some risk compliance thing where, if someone says that I have an income of this, and then they have this kind of trading behavior, it gets flagged, whole bunch of very boring things. But what is important in that, I guess, is that like we don't need that information. We're simply passing it on, but that doesn't change the fact that it's not pleasant for people to provide information, right? Like I don't like providing information either. One thing that we're trying to do is that when we kind of built this original setup flow, we approached it in a way where we said there's a few different ways that you can use your account. For instance, like invest on the ASX or invest in the US. And rather than kind of create all these kind of confusing flows, let's just have one simple flow where we ask you all the relevant questions and you get it done. We're kind of moving back away from that now, and we've decided to actually split that up because, as an example, to help kind of calm the nerves, the annual income figure is actually only needed for the US investing part. So if you don't actually intend to directly buy NYSE or NASDAQ stocks like Tesla, Google, Amazon, then we don't need to collect that information to pass on. So we're going to be trying to break this up so that we can more selectively identify what you're trying to do and then ask you the minimum questions specific to that, as opposed to just collecting all of the questions that we need for all the things that you might do. But again, we don't actually use any of this information. As product builders who want to reduce friction for our customers, I would love to wipe out this information as much as I could, but we still do get asked for it. I hope that answers that question.
I think when I was studying to become licensed, there was so much about like the anti-money laundering laws that were included, and you had to like give all this information so the government could ensure, or the providers could ensure that you're not laundering your money, which I'm so sure we're all not. On that screen, Hayden, a few back, can you go back to the HIN
Yep.
page and just talk through the 3 different options there?
Yes. So if you open up a shares account, in particular an ASX investing account, the way that the ASX is structured is that they open an account just for you that is yours legally and isn't really to do with Perla. There's a little bit to unpack there, but essentially it's kind of like you get a unique identification number, like a driver's license number for your shares that has nothing to do with Perla. That when you come to, if you're a first time investor, that number gets created for you. Let's pretend it's the number 12345. And then Perla is given permission on your behalf to buy and sell shares or ETFs against that kind of ID, if you will, that 12345. That's what we call a HIN, a holder identification number. When you set up your account, we basically need to ask you, do you need a new one? Or do you already have one somewhere else and you'd like to bring it into Perla? What the right answer for you there is again going to be up to your circumstances, but you can have multiple HINs if you want to. So you can actually go have a HIN with Combank, you can go have a HIN with Perla, you can go have a HIN with Selfwealth, all these different platforms. There's no downside to that except for that, things are harder to consolidate. I gave that driver's license example, but a probably better example is like a bank account. Are there times where having multiple bank accounts can be useful for people? Sure. Do a lot of people prefer to have all their savings or their transactions in one bank account? Yeah, because it's easier to track. So that is kind of up to you. If you're a first-time investor, it's really easy because you just say, I'm a first-time investor, and we make one for you. But if you've already got an account with something like a Combank, NabTrade, etc., you may want to move that across to Perla. It will make your life a little bit easier in general, I'd say. Again, it depends what you're trying to do. The cool thing is, though, that if you already have an account with something like Combank and you have, say, $10,000 of a Vanguard ETF in there, you don't actually, you can just go and invest on Perla and keep that separate. And for some people, that's quite a comforting thing because, Perla might be this unknown new company and, Combank has been there for 5 years, it's safe. So you can actually go and open an account on Perla, maybe invest $1,000 and then move things across later. That's actually what I did. Honestly, I actually started, I think, I built Perla with our employees, right? But before Perla, I had to use another platform. and I had a HIN over there. And when I opened my Perla account like 5 years ago, I made a HIN on Perla, and I stopped investing in the old platform and I started investing in Perla. And then what happened was I said, well, I like Perla because it's my company. And then I moved the shares across from that HIN to my new HIN. That old HIN still existed, it just didn't have shares in it anymore. And then I closed it off. And then I had it all in the new HIN. If I could be totally honest, it was a little bit of a pain at tax time to kind of have had shares half owned between two different HINs. So if you're like totally comfortable with things, transferring the whole HIN across, including all the shares, will give you the least administrative headache. But you can always just create a new HIN at Perla and transfer things later. No harm in that at all.
Yeah, no need to get too stuck on this step. I think I have my same HIN, which has been awesome, but also doesn't really matter if you make a new one either. This one's a quick one, Hayden. Is it
Yeah.
easy enough to change your name in Perla if you get married, or would it be best to wait and open an account with my new name?
Yes, it's quite like so. Perla can change your name for your investing account anytime. We just again, we don't do this directly. We pass this on to a technology provider. They require your ID to they require your name change to match something you have on ID. So if you do get married and say change your name, then you'll need to get your ID updated. And the second your ID is updated, you can share that with us and your name change, and we can go get that process for you. So whether you wait or not, it's really up to you. It's not really about when your name changes legally. It's when there's ID updated. So if your ID is updated, we can make it happen instantly, and it's just really up to you.
Awesome. Elise asked, are you able to choose both the roundup and the automatic deposit options?
Yes, you are able to choose both the roundup and automatic deposit options. You can set kind of like two things up. Like you could set up one to, deposit $100 a week into something, and then you could go back and create a new automation where you round up into that same thing. That's doable.
Can you touch on the prepay and save and subscription options? I think this is referring to the cheaper brokerage fees.
Yeah. Let me see if I can quickly get to that page. Oh, it's not there. I'm not sure what the quick link is, but it might be prepaid. Nope. Sorry, I'll find it later. I'm just don't want to waste your time now. But we essentially have a feature at Perla where you can spend $55 and we will give you $65 of credit, where that, $65 can be spent on trades. Now, obviously, $650 a trade means $65 of credit gives you 10 trades, like 10 investments in an ETF or share. And at $55, it's essentially 15% off. That's the context. A lot of people do that who kind of know that they're 100% going to be using Perla for the next 10 investments. So it's essentially if you know you're going to be here for 10 times, the next 10 investments, we can save you 15% just by, paying up front. If you want the short answer as to why we do that, we're a growing company and it's a strong signal to the people that support us when we see all these people who are super committed. So like it actually, yeah, we make less money, but we make less money and it comes with like a good vibe, for lack of a better, more detailed description. So that's just the kind of context if you're like, oh, what's going on there? But we are starting to try and move towards a subscription model for simplicity where, rather than say $55 for $65 of credit or something, which is a little bit weird, we actually just kind of might say $5 a month for discounted trades or something like that. We want to kind of create a more consistent cadence to that investing for those who are quite comfortable with Perla and would like to kind of lock it in and again, like set and forget, automate. Like if you know you're going to be here for 6 months, we just want to make it much more straightforward.
I like the good vibes. Francis asked, as a first-time investor, what happens once you've purchased your own shares? Do we get a HIN letter in the mail, or does the platform collate your ownership letters digitally?
It's a good question. So you will get from my understanding, and honestly, this is a little bit new because they've only kind of changed how they do the mail and email thing in the last couple of years. You will get a mail, something in the post that gives you a HIN. It's like your HIN open document, like congrats, you have a new HIN. And then everything after that, if you clicked like I want to be notified by email, will come in by email. We don't collate that. They're kind of sent to you. In a lot of ways, the systems in Australia are more complex than I guess a lot of us would like, but we are essentially your gateway to a bunch of underlying disparate complex systems that might mail you separate things. And without kind of unpacking what a share registry is, for example, they might send you an email, and our job is just to help your account get set up so they know whose email to send that to. And to people who've been asking too, can we access this video after the live streamers? Yes, it's a public video, so it'll be up for sure. Sometimes it might go down for a couple hours while it's processing or something like that, but at least you could check it out tomorrow. It'll be all fine or there on the YouTube page.
Let's just touch on dividends really quickly. I've had quite a few questions on my stories about where to actually find them on Pearler. Is there an easy page you can go to, or where do we look for them?
Yeah, so on Pearler, if you just on the side or on the mobile app go to Explore and then Invest, you'll be able to go explore more shares and ETFs. And then you'll be able to pick any ETF like VAS, which is our most popular one. And you'll see some information about dividends here. So at the top of the page, firstly, you will see that there is a 3.83% annual distribution yield, and you can click on the distributions tab and kind of go further down here and see more detail. We also represent this just as like the annual distribution earnings per $1,000 invested. That might seem redundant to people, but I wanted that added in because percentages are cool, but I think it's just one layer of abstraction from the literal reality that what it is saying is like if you have $1,000 invested, that's what was paid out last year. Then it gets into some more technical information, which is a lot to unpack. But what I'd say is that this information is pretty much never gonna make the situation worse, would be my quick summary. It's always kind of just telling you degrees of which there might be benefits to this particular dividend. So don't ever kind of look at that too skeptically, at least. But that's where that information is. But I think what's important is that we get information, again, through providers that, occasionally might lag behind the source of truth by like a week or something. Like we do have some disclaimers here that, this information comes from this source. So sometimes you can just Google it. Like for instance, if you just want like VAS, you can just say, VAS fact sheet or VAS dividends, and you'll nearly always find the fund provider site or the top link. And a lot of information is there. I want to be clear, the information on Pearler is not unique. Like we are showing the same kind of information here. We might be representing it a different way, but it's the same fundamental information because we are just offering you the chance to invest in a product that you can also buy on, again, ComSec, NabTrade, all of those different services. And final note here, we do have a distribution history. So you can kind of see here the yearly distribution earnings per share. Looking at this while we talk, honestly, I'd probably go and change this one up because I don't think, again, this is represented well, because where this gets really confusing for everyday people, is you think per share. Well, the share price right now is, I don't even think we show the share price very easily because it's largely not that relevant. There, share price, $94. So what that's saying is that for every $94 of this ETF you own, last year $1.56 was paid out, the year before that $3.50, the year before that $6.30, which is actually kind of convenient here because that's nearly $100. So you can kind of estimate that roughly to be like 1.5%, 3.5%. But that's where you'll see that information on Pearler.
Amazing. I think we are all done for questions. Oh, one came through. When inputting your super details, is there a way to link it so it automatically updates on your Pearler account? Interesting. That'd be fun.
I love that question, Nicole. Thank you so much. So with superannuation, it's a big deal to Pearler because, Pearler's a company about trying to help you achieve financial independence in the simplest way possible, which means building up a portfolio over decades and then, living on the passive income, essentially. Super is so critical in that However, super companies don't provide the technology that allows us to automatically connect to them. If they did, I'd be all over it. Priority number one, but they don't, and that's okay because they probably don't have a massive demand for it at a national scale at this stage. It's not like banks, where banks were forced by the government to be able to allow companies like Pearl to connect to them. Super funds just aren't required to do that. So yeah, it is still manual entry for now. Uh, the best we can do, or the best we've thought about, is a monthly email prompt to remind customers to update it if they haven't updated it in a while, so they can kind of, have the history in Perla. But yeah, not there's some tech limitations there for now.
That'd be awesome if you could, though. There's one from Tyson saying, "Can you change your annual income earned if you get a high-paying job?" I think you don't need to bother changing this on Perla. Am I right?
Yeah, that's correct, Tyson. So that information that we asked during onboarding is just for account opening. Again, that's actually a process that is fairly opaque to us. We've just kind of been told that's necessary for their, risk and compliance teams. The US broker, the one that's managing the US trades for people that make it. So it's not necessary to update that.
Awesome. Well, let me know if you've got any final questions, anyone. I think we just got through them all, which is awesome. Thank you, Hayden. This has been great.
Yeah, no problem. Um, if people do have any other questions, then obviously feel free to just reach out to our team at Perla anytime as well. We're going to try and be running these kinds of webinars and other things more often. In fact, me and my co-founder Nick, we run the company together. We're going to be doing I'm not sure what platform it's on, but we're going to be doing a kind of Ask Me Anything on Wednesday this week as well. So we're hopefully going to do a lot more of this high touch engagement with our customers so that you can get questions answered pretty quickly. But as always, you can just reach out to our team via the live chat. My head's kind of in the way at the moment in this recording, but usually there's a little button under here where you can reach out in the live chat, or you can just email us at help@perla.com. And I guess a big thanks for Tash for kind of hosting and channeling all the questions through today, Tash.
Yeah, thanks for all your time. But yeah, thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining us.
Amazing. Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Yay, bye.